welcome to the Go Phish podcast, where we dive into the minds of those battling the ever-evolving cyber threats. I'm Dan Thornton, and today we're joined by Devin Lukomski, president of OTM Cyber. With a background in the US Army and a knack for strategic operations, Devin brings a unique perspective to the cybersecurity landscape. Devin, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dan, and I'm really excited to be here. These are always great conversations to have, and getting the message out there for cybersecurity is awesome. I'm glad you got this show, and I'm glad to be a guest.
Brilliant. And for those unfamiliar with OTM Cyber, can you share your primary focus, what you guys do, and what types of clients you guys serving?
Yeah, of course. So we are a cybersecurity company generally, but what we primarily focus on is security center as a service, which differs a little bit from a lot of the offerings nowadays where they do XDR is the new hotness, where it's agent-based security. We are an appliance-based security, just a little bit different in terms of deployment, but our company does the full gambit of security offerings, incident response, training, penetration testing, some tools that are just resold from other elements like endpoint security, server security, stuff like that. But our bread and butter is that security operations center as a service. We have a fully US based security operations center that monitors our client networks 24/7, and we package incident response with that. Primarily, our clients are in critical infrastructure and a lot in public safety, in emergency services. So in the US, when you call 911, those call centers they go to, we've got over 60 clients that are in that space specifically.
And are you dealing with those clients directly, Devin, or are you working through channel, working through MSPs and MSSPs?
We go direct. So we do have just corporate partnerships with other elements, but ultimately when it comes to the security offering, in fact, that's something that we boast as a differentiator for us is when our clients or partners call in because they have a security question or an issue or something like that, they're working directly with a SOC analyst. It's not going to some customer service forum or a customer service line. They're connected directly to cybersecurity analysts.
Yeah, brilliant. Devin, you're a vet, so am I, from the UK military, other side of the pond. What inspired your transition from military service to the cybersecurity sector?
So I did a lot of different things when I was in the military. I started off infantry, then I was artillery. And at the tail end of my career, I transitioned into electronic warfare and cyber. And unabashedly, that was a move to try and make myself more marketable after the military, because I loved doing infantry and artillery things, but the translation to the corporate world for those fields is a little bit challenging. And so I made that transition and got to work in that space in the Department of Defense at the later end of my career, which is really cool because there's a lot of new projects, a lot of new programs. I was part of standing up a brand new type of military unit, and getting to write the book was really challenging, but very cool at the same time. So that was the experience there at the tail end, and how I ultimately ended up doing something like that after the military.
Yeah, amazing. That's great forethought. Yeah. So some of us were not so thoughtful about specializing properly for Civvy Street. How did your qualifications in the military transfer into civilian street? How did you find that transfer of qualification? Did you need to go and recertified? Like, how did that move go once you landed outside of the military?
That's a great question. And I think there's a lot that goes a lot of different ways for folks that might even be in the same field as I was at the tail end of my military career. As an officer, I was more of a generalist than a guy who was putting hands on the keyboard and actually doing cyber things. And really that translated as I left the military as well. Although I helped run the organization, most of my focus is about outreach, messaging, partnering with other elements, companies, clients, and things of that nature, not so much performing the act of cybersecurity analysis or defense myself. So I didn't have to go through new recertifications and things like that. What was really beneficial, though, was one of the things I took to heart as I left the military. And nowadays, because cyber is this kind of, at least relatively speaking, new novel capability in the military, the ability to translate it to commanders that are firing cannons or shooting rifles or using crew serve weapons on vehicles, traditional military tactics, that translation of the value of the cyber capabilities, of the non-lethal capabilities to those maneuver commanders was a challenging aspect of what we had to tackle. That was often an obstacle in the military. And I think that translates pretty well to what I'm doing now, because a lot of times if you come at folks, we know in the cybersecurity community, everybody needs cybersecurity, and there's a lot of great reasons why. But convincing people that they need it can be really challenging. And if you jump into, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this with this IP, this with these MAC addresses, I need your network diagram, I need to see how you're segmenting VLANs. If you jump into that stuff, you're going to lose them really quick, and they're not going to understand the value. That translation aspect has been really helpful. And really, that's how you talk to people about the need for cybersecurity. That's how you convince people that the need is out there, is speaking in there.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I don't think there's any better practice of perfecting your communication for the need for cybersecurity than trying to convince a frontline commander to spend time doing that, for sure. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Because they're the mindset. They're like, even if traditional aspects like artillery and fires, they'd be like, look, if they're piddling around over there, I'm just going to take this hill with a bunch of riflemen. So you can't convince them quickly of the need for non-lethal effects. You're going to find yourself just sitting on the bench.
Yeah, that's amazing. And from your vantage point, how have cyber threats transformed since you began your career? So since you started down the cyber route in the military and since coming out, and how have you seen the threats transform over time?
So there's always some constants in the cybersecurity realm and with threats, but there's a lot of constants. The biggest change really has been AI, and AI, as I'm sure you've spoken with other guests about, has changed pretty significant things about the landscape. In my opinion, it's changed the speed and the proliferation of threats. It works for both sides. So defenders can use AI to step up defense and move at a pace quicker to respond to different newer threats. But the threats are obviously doing the same thing as they always are. They're always trying to circumnavigate those new defense mechanisms, and they're using AI to do it. And so that chess game has sped up between the two sides. The other thing is the proliferation. And I say that because someone who had no cyber capability can now go into an AI, ChatGPT or pentest.ai, and say, I want to hack into this thing. Tell me how. And it'll tell you how. And it'll be like, for exercise purposes only. So there's that. And then on top of that, because of this easier access, you now have a lot of folks just selling malware as a result, because with the dawn of AI, ransomware as a service has also become huge, because you have all these folks that now have access to small ransomware packages. They can get them very easily, and then they can sell them for 20 to 80 bucks a pop to folks that never would have had access to them, that can just use them for whatever they want. Put them on a USB drive, try a USB drop, whatever it might be.
You mentioned the speed has increased, but with the chess game that we know is there's always been the chess game. Before AI, it was algorithms. And before algorithms, it was some basic digital systems that were being used. There's always been that chess game between defender and attacker. Today with AI, both are armed with the same technology. Is there an increased risk, or is it the same chess game just getting played really fast? Do you think that do you think the attackers have got an advantage now over the defenders finally?
So it's the same game being played faster. And in terms of the added risk, the additional risk with that is the decision-making speed of the director or the leader of the organization might be outpaced by the speed of the game. You get what I'm saying? So that's one aspect where you might see an increase of risk as a result, because that person's probably not keeping up with the evolving game, as we're referring to it here in this conversation, in the same way. And in terms of, do I think that it's provided an additional advantage? Do I think that it's allowed threats to gain the advantage? Completely no. But there are aspects where they do get a little bit of an advantage and it's the same advantage I think they always might have had. And that's that developments on that side don't follow the same rules. So it's almost, so refer back to our military experience, certain nations adhere to the Geneva Convention. Certain nations adhere to certain laws of conflict. But same thing in the cyber space. The good guys are going to adhere to the rules. They're going to adhere to regulation and compliance standards that slow things down as compared to what threat actors are doing, or the methods that they're using to proliferate the tools to a greater audience on either side. So it's a little bit skewed. I don't think it's become massively so as a result, but I think that's...
Do you think because of that proliferation, because it's so much more available now and the volume of attacks have been increased so significantly, do you think that your small to mid-sized businesses are more vulnerable than ever because of that proliferation? Because we talk about the chess game just speeding up, but we're assuming that everybody has defense in place. Everybody is using protection, but there are still so many companies that don't have it in place because I'm too small, it's never going to happen to us, or I've got one or two things in place. But with the volume of attacks that are happening now with AI, do you think SMBs are more vulnerable than ever?
I do. I think you make a great point in saying that. And because the volume is there, because threats can just throw something at the wall until something sticks, so to speak, at a greater rate than they previously could. Yeah, your smaller organizations and SMBs definitely are more threatened nowadays. I agree with that.
And Devin, your clients leaning more towards technological defenses, policy compliance, or are they starting to address human vulnerabilities as well? Which of those are they leaning towards? Which is the priority that you're seeing? What's the market sort of screaming for?
The priority is, and I think always stays, the technology side of things. Even if that's a service like ours, where it's get a security operations center in place that is monitoring our stuff. Usually that's the way folks are going to lean. But you do make a great point, and I say this all the time, and that's that two things. One, cybersecurity isn't an IT problem or a cyber problem. It's an everyone problem. And two, the weakest link in cybersecurity is always the user. So there's a lot of value to be had in training your folks, and especially because that can be achieved with a little bit less resources, depending on what it is. But you might not be looking at a full network rebuild and instead saying, okay, I'm just going to do some focused user training on phishing, new threats, what these things look like, definitions. There's a lot of benefit to be had by focusing on the human aspect.
Yeah. And is that a service that you guys will offer and deliver as part of your services, or are you sending your clients elsewhere for that sort of stuff?
We do offer those things. It's not that we specialize in it necessarily, because I know that there are companies out there that just do training and focus on training. It's just one aspect of what we do. One exercise that we do is what we call our cyber war games, and it's one of our offerings. And we've seen really good success with it in terms of the enthusiasm with which it's approached as opposed to other cyber training methods. And with that, what we do is we get a whole roster together, usually between 20 to 50 folks, break them into teams, balance out leadership experience, organizational experience, and technical experience throughout those teams. And then we have a fully evolving scenario that they play through against a live red team. And and I know tabletop exercises are nothing new, and plenty of folks have been doing them. The beauty of this is I think a lot of tabletop exercises follow traditional, like, here's the script, and you're always staying within some very set right and left limits. With this, although those right and left limits are there because otherwise the exercise would bubble out of control. The beauty is you can have 5 teams. Team 1 might end up at the end of a scenario in a very different place than team 4 did, just because they're playing against a live red team that's reacting to what exactly they're doing every step of the way. And they get to build the narrative as they go, as opposed to stay to a single specified narrative.
Yeah, it's a cool way to do it. I was involved in crisis management for a number of years before getting involved with and starting Goldphish. I ran crisis management for large multinationals in the oil and gas space. And the tabletops were a huge feature of the training, and always such an enjoyable experience for the executives taking part, and the crisis teams taking part, and the technical teams taking part. And it was always a really good experience for the technical teams to actually showcase what they can do and the value that they can bring to the bosses that have maybe never met them and have no idea what they do, and actually able to really showcase how capable they are and how valuable they are in these crisis events. And we love putting those on. And there was always learning in it. There was always, and small things, simple things like having telephone numbers that nobody knew how to get hold of the insurance guy. Like small basic things like that until you're actually put in a space. You can review a policy, you can review an SOP, and all you want, but until you're asking the right questions and putting it under the right pressure and really understanding where your priorities need to be, it's always interesting. So I always love the tabletop stuff. But I love your idea of splitting it up into separate teams and each team going through the same scenario but coming out with different outcomes. And that's always really cool because it's just people thinking outside of the box. How are you bringing those ideas back in? Is there do you do a post-exercise debrief where people present their different ideas and different outcomes? Like, how are you learning from that?
Yeah, so actually built into part of the way those exercises run is at the end of each scenario, we go team by team and we have them do a little discussion about how things went for them. And that's really where you start to see that value solidify for everyone in the room, because they start to mention things that like, oh man, no, we didn't think about that at all. Or we didn't think this could even end up there. What would we have done then? And they start to think about those ideas. And the other great thing too about those kinds of exercises, and I'm sure you've seen this in your experience doing them as well, is just the lessons learned or just the knowledge brought to the table by disparate individuals or disparate organizations there in the same room. Suddenly you're sharing best practices, and some of them might have nothing to do with cyber, but still you're creating shared understanding across all these organizations and raising all boats, so to speak.
And the smallest little things that can get so disrupted with a cyber attack that people don't think about, and looking at key critical infrastructure systems and OT systems and all the sort of key networks and systems that need to be protected and under cyber attack. And then HR chirps up at the bottom of the table, we've got payroll coming up. Is that going to be impacted as well? And you're like, oh shit. Yeah, that's really important.
That's an excellent observation, because we're like, oh yeah, did you bring HR into the discussion? And they're like, oh my gosh, no, we didn't think about that. And you're like, yeah, not only is payroll about to be run, but also people are getting like super mad because they're having to do manual operations in your emergency call center. They're writing on cards instead of using computer aided dispatch. So now you're having to deal with folks that are upset, all kinds of aspects. And there's a lot more that goes beyond the technical aspect of an incident. There's all the human aspects, all the leadership aspects, all the policy aspects. And that's great.
Yeah. Devin, when you guys are introducing new services and sort of new product features into what you guys are building, what factors are driving your decisions? Is it client needs and client feedback? Is it market trends, or is it internal insights from your own team?
It's a combination of all of the above, right? Because that's going to be just how business develops and we do new things. If I said there was a priority to things, the top two are going to be client needs or client asks, client desires, as well as threat intelligence. So as a cybersecurity company, we have a responsibility to be the experts, to have the intelligence that's going to make sure we're doing the best for our clients we can. But then there's also the things that the client might bring up. And I heard this once just in terms of running a business, but if you start making purely financially motivated decisions and just not decisions that are motivated by the needs or desires of your clients, then you're going to eventually peter out or run into a problem.
And the problem, the ugly side of that issue as well is it heavily weighted, or is it overly weighted, that one really big client of yours that's super loud? Do they get to dictate a little bit more? Are you trying to listen to all the clients together? You know what I mean? Because we found that you get, without even knowing it, you get horribly influenced by one or two really big clients and what they want. And we're trying desperately to steer away from that and not be influenced when it comes to that.
Yeah, you make a great point. And naturally, what's going to happen, just like with any other interaction as human beings, is the squeaky wheels are often going to get the attention because they're raising up the issue. Now, we do try to counter that by promoting like open communication with every single client, asking questions about how they feel about the service, what do they think could be improvements, trying to drive the engagement from everyone across the board as much as possible. Some folks are more outspoken than others, and naturally that might drive changes in a specific direction, but we do put an effort in trying to balance it out so that's not the only voice that's heard or the one that's controlling everything.
And what hurdles have you encountered in scaling a tech-focused company in today's environment? We've seen the market booming and we've seen it slow down and we've seen difficulties. What are some of the major hurdles that you guys have encountered?
So we started during COVID or like right before COVID. And that was before I was even with the company. But if I had to name like I could name three purely financial hurdles right now. The first was COVID. The second was the superconductor shortage. And the third is going on right now, and it's tariffs. Those three things affecting our hardware costs alone have been pretty massive. Speaking in the more general sense, though, scaling for an organization like ours, we're very small. We are purely bootstrapped funding. We didn't go out for venture capital or private interest or anything like that. Started truly a grassroots company and organic growth almost entirely. And that is always going to go a little bit slower than if you go out there and you get a big round of VC funding or something like that. So naturally it goes a little bit slower. It's a longer game in terms of making sure that those cash in versus cash out lines are separating from each other over time. And it can feel like they're just so close for so long. So naturally just some challenges there. Also with the price of cybersecurity talent. It's not a cheap thing to start from the very beginning. So when we were first starting off, certainly one of the ways we tried to weigh out or balance that out is, okay, we might have to bring folks in at entry level. So we weigh a little bit more on our internal and organic training for those folks. Additionally, other benefits in terms of like quality of life, health benefits, things like that incentivize folks a little bit more. Really, cybersecurity talent costs, hardware costs with all the big events we've had recently. Those two have been challenges for scaling in the last few years. So.
Yeah. And especially bootstrapping, it compounds all of those challenges significantly because, that's a problem.
It makes it go slower. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. No, I can definitely hear that. Do you observe regulations prompting genuine change, Devin? Do you see cybersecurity regulations, data protection regulations, these types of requirements pushing from government, from industry? Do you see them as prompting demand change in our space, or are they often treated as just formalities?
That's a great way to phrase the question. So I think that it's all ultimately moving in the right direction. And I can cite a couple examples of that. One is a NIST, for the US, NIST, National Institute of Standards and Standards of Technology. Sorry, I always mess up that acronym. But NIST recently has transitioned to where they've stated for NIST compliance, the idea is that you have third-party monitoring. They've specified that in their compliance regulations, which is really good because what you had for a long time in the industry is a lot of companies, a lot of these big companies that like too big to fail companies would be like, yep, we're totally securing our own stuff. And then they might be, but then you're still getting messages about data breaches and they never really say anything about it. They never really let you look under the hood in terms of what their security policies are. So it's good to see that they're saying the right answer is third party. Another example is here in the US, and specifically because we deal with public safety and it's often connected to police and criminal justice systems, is Criminal Justice Information Systems, CJIS is what it's called for short. And that's a security standard or a compliance standard in place by the FBI and states specific thing. Right. It's the usual kind of security, information security standard. Recently, what they did was last year, they made it official and auditable that organizations that have to meet CJIS compliance have to have 24/7 network monitoring in place.
By a third party?
It does not, that one does not specify a third party. Okay. And that's where I'm getting to where these things fall off a little bit. And then the third example I had is CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency in the US, recently put out some information or attempted to put out some regulation about mandatory reporting and mandatory security requirements for what they deem as critical infrastructure organizations. And those are all moves in the right direction. But then what ends up happening is, I think, where things fall off. And I think it'll come with time, but unfortunately, things are advancing very quickly in technology, as they always are. Is NIST is one of these great security standards, but I think it's because it's like this awesome security standard that it's almost held at an aspirational level for a lot of organizations. So a lot of times they're like, yeah, we're working towards NIST compliance, and attaining NIST compliance can be very difficult for them, especially SMBs, as you mentioned. And because there's not an organization that's going to hold them accountable to not meeting NIST compliance in a lot of cases, it might just fall by the wayside in terms of that organization's risk tolerance or risk calculus. It's great to see things like CJIS, them doing auditable regulations when it comes to the 24/7 monitoring. So that's a good idea. And then the CISA requirement for mandatory reporting, that was another one where I think that it was attempted to be put out as a regulation, but the enforcement becomes very difficult for these regulatory bodies. And that's where we see things fall off, unfortunately. I think with time, they'll get better at building their own capability to enforce, but it's not quite.
Do you think in the US, you've just rattled off 3 or 4 different frameworks and different setups and different bodies? Do you think there'll be consolidation of that? One framework to rule them all, regardless of the industry that you're in, one overarching framework, if you can hit that and comply with that. Otherwise, which one are you needing to comply with, and do you need to comply with multiple? And you get what I'm coming at?
Yeah. As a cybersecurity professional, I wish the answer was yes, that there would be one that's put out and just says everybody needs to do this.
Yeah.
But realistically, that's very tough to, as we've seen with just the last 3 examples I gave, where we can put out this thing, but then the enforcement becomes very difficult to achieve on a wide scale. So unfortunately, do I think something like that would come soon? No. Would I love to see it happen? Yes.
Brilliant. Devin, thanks very much for sharing your insights and experiences. It's been amazing to hear your background and your thoughts there. Before we wrap up, can you let listeners know how they can learn more about OTM Cyber and connect with you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is otmcyber.com. They can find us there. Pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So if you're on LinkedIn, you can follow myself or any of our folks from our organization on there. You can look it up too. So those are all ways you can get in touch. And we're always happy to be a resource when it comes to cybersecurity. We're not, even if we don't end up selling you something, we're happy to talk cybersecurity with you.
Brilliant, man. Thanks very much. That's it for today's episode of Go Phish. Stay tuned for more episodes where we unravel the complexities of cybersecurity. Thanks again for listening. If you found this valuable, drop us a follow and feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Catch you all next time. Thank you.